Hey everyone, how's it going? Alexander back at you with another video. Today we are talking about working with Canon RAW footage or C-RAW from your C400 or your C80. When the C400 and 80 were announced a while back, we were all quite happy to hear 6K full frame and RAW recording internal features from the C400 or external recording features from the C80. Working with those file types, those RAW files are quite taxing. So today we're going to talk about the system requirements, what I use, what my system is set up as. I'm going to talk LUTs and applying external LUTs that you might purchase. We're going to talk the color grading process, and we're going to talk my workflow. First, a quick word from today's sponsor, lighting. As you know, I love lights. Lightmons, a company from Godox, sent me this light, the LA200R. And it's basically replaced my Aperture 300X in terms of these talking head videos ever since I've gotten it. It offers a ton of light at 200 watts. Great enough for something like this, a talking head situation. It has a very low footprint, so I can easily tuck it away in a corner in a small home office like this. Great for content creators or beginner videographers. I highly recommend checking them out. I'm not a YouTuber, I'm a DP, I'm a videographer, so bear with me on this. I'm gonna ramble my way through the editing process, the post-production process for a project I recently finished up yesterday. I basically filmed the whole 37-minute podcast interview on Canon C-RAW with a C400 at 6K. For those of you asking, the C400 and the C80 can only be utilized, you can only utilize a full function of your sensor if you're utilizing the highest recording capabilities on that camera, and that is, of course, utilizing C-RAW. But be prepared if you're working with those files. They are pretty hefty. Canon's done a great job over the years of compressing those files and making them a little more manageable. And of course, the software is improved, but still, it's going to be taxing on your system. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my system and what those requirements are. Let me go ahead and pull that up, and I'll just tell you right now. I am on a 2023 model of the Apple M2 Ultra chip, and I'm maxed out on everything, basically 8 terabytes of storage, and I also got another 30 terabytes of storage over here, and I also work off of a 4 terabyte SSD, which I use for my current projects, and I store everything else on the 30 terabytes of storage I have externally. You're always going to work off your desktop if you can, if not an external SSD, and that's going to save you a workflow nightmare in terms of dealing with a hard drive disk. We're going to go ahead and back out a little bit and just show you the entirety of this project. As you can see, it was a 3-line, really 4-line edit. I had 4 cameras going on. As I mentioned, R5 Mark II, a C70, and a C400. Here is the look from the C400. Looking pretty clean in my opinion. Here is the scene from the C70, and we have the scene from the R5 Mark II. Some would question why I opted to use the R5 Mark II on the wide shot. Basically, I knew that wide shot wasn't going to be in there very often. The main premise of this video was my client here. So I knew a majority of the footage was going to be this scene right here, so that's why I opted to use the C400. If you're on a multicam shoot, you're going to want to consider your log settings. In this case, I was on CLog 2 from the C400, the C70, and the R5 Mark II, and I was at the same white balance, basically 56K. Benefit with RAW files, you're going to have a lot more options in terms of editing capabilities. So let's go ahead and look at my C400 file. I'll just pick one of the clips here, and we'll open the inspector tab. You can see it was filmed Canon RAW Light, and we were at the 6K at CLog 2. Now you can see here my Canon LUT, or my camera LUT, is set to none. You're going to have a bunch of default options right here to include CLog 2, which is what I was filming on. Basically your LUT, for those of you, and I apologize if this is beginner, but if, a lot of you get the C70 or C80 because that's your entry-level cinema camera. I know that was the case for me. You're not going to want to just do some basic saturation and some contrast adjustments to your log footage. You're always going to want to apply a LUT. I'm not a colorist by any means, but I do have some, I know enough to be dangerous and to make my clients happy. So let's go ahead and talk my process. You can see here we have a custom LUT applied, so I didn't use a standard LUT that Final Cut Pro offers, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we have a number of adjustment layers, and finally we have a color adjustment layer. Basically apply a light color grade to it. Even though it was just a podcast, it wasn't anything too crazy, it wasn't a documentary scene, I still want to apply some color grading and some cinematography type techniques in terms of my post-production to this project. So my LUT was a Canon C-Log 2 to Rec 709 conversion LUT. This particular LUT was downloaded from the Canon's website, and I'll make sure I include a link to that. This particular LUT came out after the C400, particularly for the C400, I assume. So make sure you get the right one. Not all LUTs are created the same. They are specifically tuned to your camera, and they're also specifically tuned to the type of footage you're using. So just keep in mind and do your research on that. And you can see how flat it looks. This is basically what you're looking at in terms of log footage. All right, so I basically went into my effects tab and I typed in custom, and I dragged and dropped that custom onto the footage itself. And then once you apply the Canon LUT 65 grid and CLog 2, make sure you do CLog 2 because that's what we filmed in. That's what's given us that nice, rich, punchy look. From there, I added a series of color adjustments, as I've mentioned. You can see even after we applied the LUT, it's still not perfect. We're okay in terms of exposure, but there's more we could do to it to enhance our footage. So in our effects tab, typed in color, and from here you have color curves, which I use, color wheels, and color adjustments. You're gonna want to apply all your adjustments above the LUT. That's going to ensure the cleanest possible look. So my first adjustment was color wheels, and we go into the color wheels tab, and you can see I adjusted my highlights some, I brought down my shadows, and I adjusted my midtones. That's all I did, because I was going to make other adjustments. You can make your adjustments to your saturation and all that. You could even do some color grading in here. I don't like to do that. I like to have a separate one for my basic exposure adjustment. The next thing I did was I tackled my midtones, and I do this by adding a color curves. And you can see we brought our midtones up just a little bit, and basically if you look, I made somewhat of an S-curve. I brought up my midtones and I brought down my shadows, and that's essentially just going to give me more of a contrasty look. You can still see we're well within good parameters for good exposure. Next, but not last, or last but not least I should say, is my color adjustments. And you can see once we apply that, that just gives me the ever so subtle hint of a color grade. Nothing too crazy. Again, this wasn't the project for it. We adjusted the brightness, we adjusted the black points, and that was it. I didn't even add any saturation. I didn't think it needed it. As you can see, if you bump up the saturation, the oranges were really popping. I didn't really care to do that. But in retrospect, I probably could have bumped it up maybe by a couple points, but too late now. But that goes to show you that here you have a lot of options to tackle your specific key areas, such as your highlight warmths. We can make your highlights a little warmer. You can make your tint adjustments from there on your highlights. You can adjust your midtone warmth, your midtone tint, and your shadow warmth and your shadow tint. Just playing around with those tabs right there is going to give you a huge ability to control the look and feel of your film. So if you're a beginner level filmmaker, this would be a great option to start learning color grading if you are within Final Cut Pro. You have other options as well, such as your hue saturation curves, which you can target certain channels, and you can really play with different looks and styles. Remember, there is no right or wrong answer. There is fundamentals to understand, but really color grading is your own creative process. And there are professional color graders out there that know color science, that know what colors go together. In the end of the day, there is really no right or wrong answer. Someone at some point in time thought that the combination of teal and orange or green and purple went well together and made color science and color theory. You got to know the rules to break the rules. You have a lot of options within Final Cut Pro. The same options, if not better ones, exist in DaVinci Resolve and of course Premiere. I've played with all of those softwares before, but I've really found that Final Cut Pro is just what I have come to know and love from my iMovie days in high school to now, running a production company and making clients happy. So I'm still with Final Cut Pro. In terms of working with the footage itself, I had no issues. My system had all the requirements necessary to handle all the footage flawlessly. I didn't even have any skip frames during playback or anything like that with a 39-minute or 37-minute video filmed at 6K, full frame, raw, interframe. There's no compression. If you're not working with a computer that has the best specs, that's where Proxy files come in, and you can look up videos on that. But basically, you just turn all your files into Proxy files. They're going to be a lot more easier, a lot more manageable to work with in post, saving you a ton of time. A couple other key considerations that I might have touched on already is working with an SSD rather than a hard disk drive, and working, if you can, on your desktop as opposed to an external SSD. So yeah, that's my workflow in a nutshell. I hope this has been helpful. Just some key takeaways. If you're going to use raw files, make sure you just have the storage capabilities, make sure you have the system requirements, or be prepared to work on Proxy files. Color grading, I'm not the best in terms of color grading. This probably wasn't the best example, but know that you have so many more options with raw files than you do with your standard MP4 or XFAVC. And yeah, hopefully my process was helpful to you. If you're just unboxing your C80 or C400, hopefully you can take some notes away from this and apply them to your own workflow. And last but not least, know the rules, break the rules. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to a camera and how you use it. Just create and have fun doing it. I hope this has been helpful. I'll have some more videos coming your way soon. Until then, have a great one, and I'll catch you next time.